Today on the Spiritual Reality Podcast, we are going to cover the number one issue that causes Christians to get sucked into the false narratives that culture is pushing. Why is it that Christians are so susceptible to buying into these emotional arguments that the left makes to excuse and demand that we accept lifestyles and ideas that are just basically unbiblical? This week, we are going to break down some of the arguments that Allie Beth Stuckey makes in her book, Toxic Empathy, to answer that question. I'm your host, Jim Richmond. Thanks for listening. Let's get to it. All right, well, you may have noticed that even among Christian circles, we see people struggling to take biblical stands on things that aren't popular, especially when the world tells us that we're not being supportive or loving if we disagree with them. And this tactic seems to work really well against Christians because Christians care more than most people about how we're treating other people and how we're making other people feel. You hear things like, well, no matter what it is, Christians are supposed to be the most forgiving, so we shouldn't worry about it. Or phrases like, Jesus told us to first and foremost focus on love. Or you hear phrases like, we're supposed to put others before ourselves, so if they want me to accept their new identity, I will do that. Or they say things like, well, they feel like I hate them for not accepting what they do, so I choose love. Man, even as I say some of those phrases, they sound kind of good, right? Like, well, I choose love. Like, I mean, isn't that what we should be doing, right? And so it's very easy to get sucked into these things. Christians should care. Christians should be loving. We should be the most loving, right? But we have to look at what we mean by that when we say that, and we have to see if we're being biblical about how we love. We can't attempt to be more loving than God is, and that really is kind of what we are attempting to do many times. And so this is what caused Allie Beth Stuckey to write the book, Toxic Empathy. And if you haven't read it, I encourage you to pick it up. She does a masterful job of dealing with this issue. And it is a big deal because this is probably the leading cause of Christians drifting away from true doctrine. And often it's the first step to walking away from their faith or Christianity or the religion altogether. And so let's get into some of the main arguments that she makes. In her book, Toxic Empathy, How Progressives Exploit Christian Compassion, she argues that empathy, often seen as a virtue, has been manipulated by progressive activists to push Christians and others to support policies that conflict with biblical truth. Stuckey defines toxic empathy as a form of compassion that prioritizes emotional appeals over truth, leading people to endorse progressive ideologies or to appear, in order to appear loving or compassionate. And so she contends that empathy is exploited by left-wing activists who use emotional slogans to bully others into adapting their positions and sidelining rational or moral considerations. Now, one of the things that I appreciate about the book is that she starts by explaining the difference between cultural empathy and biblical love. And that is so important that we have that conversation. Stuckey argues that empathy, even at its best, is an emotion or a skill, and it's not a sufficient guide for moral policy or decisions. And she contrasts it with biblical love, which submits to God's definition of truth and goodness and justice. Toxic empathy demands affirmation of feelings and choices, even when they lead to harm. Whereas true love requires discernment and sometimes even correction. And that's the problem with the progressive movement in general. It makes a God out of feelings, and truth is seen as being subservient to feelings. And interpreting the Bible correctly is not as important as interpreting it in a way that makes people feel good about themselves. And that's where you start to get some of these really odd interpretations of passages, where you see all this mental gymnastics being done of, well, probably what was meant there, and that kind of thing, when the passage just clearly says what it says. She also points out that progressives use emotional language and heartbreaking stories to obscure the other side of the moral question. For example, focusing in on a woman's distress in abortion debates, and just ignoring the fetus's life. Stuckey calls this a deliberate tactic to suppress opposition by accusing dissenters of being unloving or bigoted. And she argues that truth doesn't require lies or emotionalism to persuade, unlike toxic empathy's reliance on the partial truths and a lot of emotionalism. So you've seen this, right? You've seen where they find the most tragic story that they can possibly find, and they say, you don't want people to have to live like this, do you? And this is where statements like, I'd rather have a living daughter than a dead son, when talking about parenting kids who start to feel trans, that's where those come into play. Or they'll look for stories of women in states where abortion is not readily available anymore, and they look for somebody who died trying to find a way to abort their baby on their own. And these stories are really, really sad. Nobody's happy that someone is struggling mentally, or nobody is happy that somebody died. But it doesn't change the truth, and it doesn't change reality. Telling someone that they can become the opposite sex isn't reality. And so it's not really helping their mental health. And we can't allow murder of innocent babies because people won't take responsibility for their sexual decisions. No one forces someone to risk their life for an abortion. There are other options. And so as a man, it seems really insensitive to say that. Culture says that I'm not even allowed to talk about it. But we should all be able to point out truth and reality. We all should be able to do that. Stuckey encourages Christians to ground their compassion in truth, and makes the case that compassion that is not grounded in truth is just a lie to make people feel better. But lives founded on lies never turn out well. And so that's not loving. And that's what progressive Christians forget. You may compromise truth to make someone else feel better, but you are doing long-term damage in this life, and you're doing eternal damage in the next by taking that approach. Stuckey also highlights how progressive activists use manipulative rhetoric like emotional slogans to bypass critical thinking. For instance, the phrase "love is love." It evokes feelings, but it lacks any kind of substantive arguments, right? This manipulation exploits Christians' desire to be kind, leading them to maybe support policies that may contradict biblical principles, but it actually doesn't say anything. It's catchy, but it doesn't say anything. And you can't define something by itself. That's not how you define something. And so by doing so, they send the message that whatever anyone wants to call love is love. And the truth is way more complicated than that slogan. Love is doing what is best for another person, even if it costs you something. Maybe even if it costs you them liking you. And so it's not catchy, but that would be a much more accurate statement. Stuckey warns that toxic empathy has infiltrated both the culture and the church, causing moral confusion. And she cites examples like pronoun hospitality in evangelical circles as evidence that Christians are adopting progressive ideas under the guise of compassion. She calls for clarity and courage to uphold the biblical truth. Now, the book is built around 5 key issues, and so there's basically 5 key chapters where she deals with how this is happening in 5 different areas. And so 5 areas where progressive Christians are encouraging compromise. And the first one's abortion. And the title of the chapter is "Abortion is Healthcare." So she's basically using their slogan. And that's how progressives frame abortion as compassionate, right? It's focusing solely on the woman's circumstances while ignoring the life of the unborn child altogether. And this is where you hear progressives talking about things like womb to tomb, right? They want to make the issue about whether or not Christians really support life. This is what they say. They just really want to allow abortion. But they want to act like that their concern is that Christians aren't pro-life enough, that we're not womb to tomb, that we only care about them being born. We don't care about life. And so we're pro-birth. We're not pro-life is what they would like to say. And so they want to say, unless we're willing to basically set up a system, and usually it's public funds, it's more of a socialistic system, to completely support this family all the way from womb to tomb, then we're not pro-life. We just want to make this baby be born, and then we don't care what happens to it after that. And that's the argument that they like to make. Now, there's a whole bunch of fallacies with this argument. The first and most obvious one is that honestly, no one supports young mothers in crisis situations better than churches and Christians. And so, many times helping the young mother get their house set up to welcome the child, or running adoption agencies so that the baby can end up in a good home. And the second problem with is it's just never right to do something wrong so that you can do something right. So killing a baby to solve poverty or help a mother get a better start in life is wrong no matter what. Another issue that she deals with, where Christians are tempted to exercise a form of compassion that's not rooted in reality, is gender. The transgender movement is driven by a misplaced compassion that affirms self-perceived gender over biological reality. And Stuckey argues that this ignores the inherent order of creation and can harm individuals, especially youth, by validating feelings over truth. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen yet another shooting that was done by a person who was clearly tormented by going down the gender transition lie road. The shooter said he was tired of being trans and wished that he had never brainwashed himself, is what he said. We can't fix these kinds of issues if we can't be honest about the fact that it's not a legitimate identity, but rather a mental problem that should be addressed, not celebrated and affirmed. And so we're seeing that even where it is affirmed, people still are those people that go down that road are still more mentally unstable. So a lot of times the argument is well, these people feel bullied, they don't feel like society accepts them, and that's why they're having such a hard time. But even in societies where transgenderism has been very common in other countries and it's completely accepted, they still show signs of being more mentally unstable. It's not people speaking the truth that's tormenting this, folks. It's the attempt to go against reality and to not deal with their issues biblically. In another chapter, she focuses in on sexuality. Again, the culture asks, who are you to tell somebody else how to live or who to love? Why do you have to be so hateful, non-accepting? Gay marriage is framed as an equal rights issue, making Christians kind of feel uneasy, like what if we end up on the wrong side of history on this thing, right? But we have to ask what redefining something like marriage will do to marriage and do to families and do to kids and overall to our culture. We're not trying to be mean, but we are saying that denying reality and morality is not good for culture and it's not good for anybody. And Stuckey insists that true compassion aligns with biblical standards of love, not unconditional affirmation. In the chapter entitled No Human is Illegal, she deals with toxic empathy in the area of immigration. And the mantra there is no human being is illegal. And that oversimplifies immigration issues, right? Ignoring the consequences of weak policies such as crime and resource strain, it also makes Christians feel like that the most loving thing to do is just to let anybody who wants to come, right? And be generous with public funds to help those folks. But it ignores all the terrible things that come with not knowing who is crossing our borders. And again, it sounds loving, it sounds compassionate, but when you factor in the pain and the suffering caused by just dismissing all illegal immigration, by saying things like no human is illegal, then it's hard to say that's loving when you look at the crime that comes with it, when you look at the drug use that comes with it, when you look at the human trafficking that comes with it. Like, it's not a loving thing. Stuckey advocates for balanced policies that consider both compassion for the immigrants and justice for citizens. And in the last chapter, she deals with social justice. And here's the thing. Anytime you add a word to the word justice, you just redefined it. So it's no longer justice. It's an agenda to bring whatever you're wanting for a particular group of people. And everyone should want just justice. They should just want only justice. That's all they should get. Justice is fair. It's evenly distributed. It's based on an equal standard. So the social justice movement distorts God's view of justice by prioritizing emotional narratives over objective truth, often leading to policies that call for new forms of discrimination that harm rather than help. And as I pointed out many times, the social justice movement is kind of rooted in Marxist philosophies of oppressed versus oppressor. And are there times that where someone is being oppressed by the system? Well, there have been in the past, and we brought justice to those situations. But social justice says that it doesn't matter if all the laws and the policies of our culture give equal opportunity if not everyone is experiencing equal outcomes. And that's where Marxism, socialism, those kinds of things come into play. And so if empathy for unequal outcomes cause us to lean into solutions that don't hold individuals accountable for their own actions and efforts, we're going to find ourselves in the same mess that every Marxist culture has ever experienced over the decades, which no compassionate person should ever want for their nation. Let me just say that. So Stuckey's toxic empathy argues that empathy, when untethered from the truth, becomes a tool for manipulation, pushing Christians toward progressive policies that conflict with biblical values. And listen, I would encourage you to pick this book up. I would encourage you to ask your high school students and definitely your college students to at least listen to the book. Maybe they don't have time to sit down and read a different book because they got so much going on schoolwork-wise. But you say, hey, listen, this is what I want you to be listening to when you're in a car by yourself. I want you to finish this book. It won't take that long. It's not that long. But it's going to help them realize when their concern and compassion is being preyed upon to get them to reject biblical values and morals. So, have you seen this trend? Where have you noticed it in culture? I'd love to hear from you. Do you ever experience the pressure to cave on some of these issues, or do you ever feel unloving because you just don't agree with the accepted cultural position? That's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast, especially on YouTube. It's a huge help to me. Pass it along to your friends as well, and we will see you next week.